Right, so I just got back from India, so a little bit jet lagged, still back for 4 days now. And thought I would talk a little bit about pilgrimage, about going on pilgrimage, and why do we go on pilgrimage? Why do we do things like go to holy sites? And sometimes it can be like a vision quest, like asking ourselves a question, holding a question, how to direct our lives more skillfully. But probably the majority of people who go to a place like the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, where the Buddha was enlightened 2,580 years ago or so, or 2,000, yeah, probably 2,600 years ago now. And more asking for things. So, may I get a good wife? May I get a good husband? May I have good children? May I win the lottery? That's probably the majority of aspirations that get made at the Bodhi tree, I would think. May I change wives? May I change husbands? May my children do better than they are? So these are what we call worldly aspirations, or aspirations that only pertain to this life. And that's fine. That's fine to make aspirations like this. There's a very interesting shrine that I'd never been to, and this was in Nepal, so we went with, did a American 4 holy sites pilgrimage, 42 lay people, 9 monks, so 2 full-size tour buses. 4 holy sites of the Buddha, or where the Buddha was born, in Lumbini, Nepal. The Buddha was awakened, Bodh Gaya, Bodhi tree, where the Buddha gave the first teaching. That's in a place called Sarnath, outside of a city, a 7,000-year-old city called Varanasi. And then there's where the Buddha passed away in what's called Kushinagar. In the time of the suttas, it was called Kusinara. And so those are the 4 main holy sites of Buddhism. And then each of those sites, there's sub-holy sites. So near Lumbini in Nepal, there's Kapilavatthu, where the Prince Siddhartha, the future Buddha, grew up. So that's a place that was just confirmed in 2014 that it is actually the place. They found the archaeological evidence that showed that it was, without a doubt, where the Buddha grew up. So we visited there. I've always considered that a very special place, because it's not only where the Buddha grew up, but it's also where the Buddha rode out of the east gate of the palace to leave home and go become the Buddha. So very special place. And then when we visited that place, we did some meditation at the east gate, where they discovered the archaeological semi-fossilized circles in the ground 10 feet down that show that that's where the pillars of the east gate were set. And there's a shrine in that area. Now it's just like a park, but people like to go there, and it's called Tirakut. And in the middle of this park, there's a very ancient shrine to an earth goddess, so Mother Earth, the earth goddess. And we were shown this shrine, and last time I'd gone to this place in 2017, we were not shown this particular shrine. And it's a very, very ancient shrine, and it's said to predate the Buddha by 300 years, and it's been in continuous use the whole time. And it's a shrine that people go to pray for children, and also to pray for being cured of illnesses. And it's said that many people have been cured of illnesses by praying at this shrine. And it's an elephant shrine. So there's a lot of stone elephants at this shrine, and it's next to a very old tree, and it's a little hut with a very, very ancient stone elephant inside of it. And people would offer stone elephants to the outside of this shrine if they were cured of their illness or if their wishes were fulfilled. And it was called the Samamai shrine. And Samamai is the ancient name of this earth goddess that they worshipped. And it's said that the Buddha's parents actually prayed at this shrine, prayed to have a son. And then in the story of the Bodhisattva coming down into his mother's womb from Tushita heaven, it's an elephant. It's an elephant coming down. And in her dream, she dreams of a white elephant coming down and merging into her. And then if you fast forward to the Buddha's awakening, you have the hordes of Mara coming to test the Buddha and slinging all sorts of weapons and arrows at him, and they turn into flowers as they approach the aura of the Buddha, the newly awakened Buddha. And then you have this earth goddess come out and wash away the hordes of Mara by shooting water out of her hair. And so going to this shrine connected all sorts of dots for me with the life of the Buddha. It was really amazing. And there was a medicine woman there banging a drum and doing a puja, and it all felt very ancient. And Nyaniko made the comment, because we all went into the shrine and had a chance to, for myself, I was able to touch the forehead of this very ancient stone elephant, and there's also a very ancient hanging of all sorts of bells that people have offered over the centuries inside of this very small shrine room. Tanhemiko made the comment that it's not 2025 in there. It's very like you're being transported back to a different time by going into this earth goddess shrine. And so very, very interesting. I just thought it was fascinating. And I told our group, if anybody wants to make a wish, this is the place to make a wish. So also that was a very special highlight. And when we go pilgrimage to these places, we make wishes, we make aspirations. And the Bodhi tree, the place of where the Buddha's awakening, that's why we have all of the Buddha's teachings, is because the Buddha actually attained awakening at this place. And all traditions of Buddhism agree that that's the spot. That is the Mecca of Buddhism. At the Mahabodhi temple, there's a 1,400-year-old temple there with a very ancient stone Buddha inside of it. It's called Buddha Metta. It's probably the most famous Buddha image in the world. And people go and pray at Buddha Metta, and it's a very small room inside of this temple. And the temple is quite tall. It's about 170 feet tall and been renovated over the years. Actually has Thailand has put a lot of money into renovating it and re-gilding this pinnacle on the top of it and so on. But that's a very special place to meditate and make aspirations. And then Indian tourists go there, newlyweds go there to get the blessings. Everybody agrees that there's blessings there. So it doesn't really matter what religion you are. So, but for us who have faith in the awakening of the Buddha, then we go there to practice. And I think for myself and for the monks and for the long-term lay practitioners, then to deepen our aspirations to practice and also remake our aspirations to practice. If they've grown weaker over time, then we can rekindle those aspirations. And so a lot of people will make aspirations, may I be cured of this or that illness. I actually thought of, may I be cured of my back pain. And but then for myself, I was thinking, well, that's a very temporary aspiration. The Bodhi tree is not a place to make temporary aspirations. And so I found myself recommending and also making for myself more aspirations more along the lines of, may I always come into contact with good teachers. May I never be separated from the Dhamma in however many lives it takes me to attain awakening. May I never be separated from good teachers. May I always have spiritual friends, and may I always have people who encourage me to practice, and may I always be in situations where I'm able to continue my Dhamma practice. And so aspirations such as this, long-term aspirations which go beyond this lifetime, can be a bit more powerful. And those aspirations, when you make them at a place like the Bodhi tree, those aspirations do bear fruit. And when we also, a lot of monks who have gone Tudong, where we actually walk on faith and walk up or down Highway 101, or Ajahn Tita Panyo and Ajahn Kasapo and Kevin, they walked here at the beginning of Three Jewels. They walked on Tudong from Abhayagiri, and all sorts of magical things happen when we live on faith, and when we do these Tudong practices. Or myself, when I walked with Tanti Tapo up to Pacific Hermitage, or any of the other shorter Tudongs that I did, either along the coast with Ajahn Kasapo in 2016 here, and Metika sending us off from here, and we started and ended here. I've always thought of Three Jewels as a bit of a Tudong way place, and there's all sorts of serendipitous and magical things that happen. You get supported in ways that you wouldn't think you would get supported. You meet special people you wouldn't think you would otherwise meet, and it just seems to be the timing is just, you couldn't even plan it or make it up that way, of the way things happen when you're on Tudong. So when I go to a place like Bodh Gaya, I think, well, that's the source. Bodh Gaya is the source of the magic. So when we go visit that place, it's like going with a heart of gratitude and thanking the place for being the source of the magic. But one of the things, though, is that the place is so powerful that it draws all realms of existence to it. So there's all sorts of good things there, but then there's bright energies and there's dark energies there as well. There's fake monks who come up to you and give you a Bodhi leaf and start chanting refuges at you, and then demand money because they just gave you a service. And there's people who have polio and beggars outside of the temple who a truck drops them off at 4 a.m, like 10 or 20 beggars who have one or more limbs, less than 4 limbs, and they'll scooch around on the ground outside of the temple and begging for money. But then if you know what's actually happening, they don't actually get the money. They just give it to their bosses who pick them up in a truck at the end of the day. And so there's these very kind of horrible things happening as well, but it's just India. So you just have to let India be India, and just you take it all in and use it as a reflection, use it as a contemplation. And there's dogs wandering around in the temple, and sometimes they're quite nice. They come and lay their head on your lap while you're meditating. Or sometimes they start fighting near you and they scare you, or they fight with each other. On this particular trip, there was a dog that got bit really bad, and it got a chunk of flesh taken out of its neck. And whenever I would walk to the restrooms in Bodh Gaya, because we did a week of meditation there together, and I would sometimes get up and go to the restrooms, and I would see this dog and this wound, and it was getting more and more infected each day. And then there was one day where the dog was obviously feverish, and it was breathing very fast, and the wound was extremely infected and gross looking. And then the next day the dog was gone. So it was like I watched this dog die from this wound. And it's just very, very brutal. But then a good reflection on conditioned existence, that it's all in India, it's all in your face. And sometimes you might even see a dead body, a human, on the side of the road, and they'll take them away. Sometimes the beggars actually die. And even if you try to help them, it's almost like you can't, like you're powerless to actually change the situation. And many, many people it's a reflection on karma as well, because many, many people have tried to completely cure the poverty in Bodh Gaya. Many rich donors have gone and started programs and tried to make the situation better, and it never really changes that much. And it's very, very weird, actually, and why it doesn't change. It's like if you help one block of people, then another block just comes in from some other place, and it's just so easy to get donations there from pilgrims coming from all over the world. So it's like the poverty in Bodh Gaya, no matter how much people try to help, it never really changes. So I find this is like it's like a soup. It's like being in Bodh Gaya is like being in a soup of samsara. It's like being in the soup of conditioned existence. It's all actually Longpo Pasano arrived in Bodh Gaya the very day that I left. So I actually stayed a week longer than our group and did some self-practice. And then I didn't plan it this way, but I left on the same plane that Longpo Pasano arrived on. And he came for this Tipitaka chanting recitation, and he was just there for a week and then went back to Thailand. And so I didn't see him, but I emailed him, and he had a great description of Bodh Gaya. It had been 35 years since he'd been there last. And he said, well, it's developed a lot, but India and Bodh Gaya is still amazing, wonderful, horrible, frustrating, and unbelievable. It's some sort of perfect description of what it is. He said, but it is, it is the Bodhi tree, and it is the place of the Buddha's awakening, and it still inspires that incredible faith coming up. He also got very sick, with diarrhea and vomiting for most of the week there. So I hope he's feeling better. But yeah, coming back to why we go on pilgrimage, why we do these things, and our group had an incredibly good experience. I was extremely impressed with our group. And we had a wide variety. Our youngest pilgrim was 29, and our oldest was 84. And people did great. It was great. It's a wonderful experience, and people were troopers and just took everything in stride. And we had some Zoom meetings beforehand and kind of told people about what to expect, or just to have no expectations in India. And people took that on and did incredibly well from the moment we arrived at customs in Bodh Gaya, where it's usually really, really slow and frustrating to get in through customs. And I couldn't believe that it was the same. It was slow for the same reason that I was last there a few years ago, in that they have these really old fingerprint scanners, and they just never work properly. And you're just standing there, and they're like, put your fingers on again, and clean your fingers off with these pads, put them on again. It's like the same for every single person. You would think, why don't they just get new scanners or come up with a different, this is so stupid, why don't they come up with a different system? They have this problem day in and day out, and it's just, but you just have to surrender to it, and it's not meant to make sense. And but yeah, we eventually got through, and some people are kind of just over and over again for literally 10 minutes kind of putting their fingers on and then cleaning this thing off, and then he's like, okay, try again, and press harder, press lighter, press more centered. So until he's sort of looking at some sort of screen and the guy's happy with it. And so we got through, people were okay. We had this wonderful experience on our first full day in Bodh Gaya before we did our 4 holy sites pilgrimage. We had a full day at the Bodhi tree. So you fly direct from Thailand, Bangkok to Bodh Gaya, and you don't have to do any long drive or anything. So we had a half a day, and then we had a full day at Bodh Gaya before the next day when we actually started driving in our buses to these different holy sites. And so we did a morning puja meditation, which was wonderful, at this really prominent platform that we were set up at, so 50 of us, and then you can just see the temple towering up in front of you. We did our morning puja and some meditation, and then our tour guide came and said we had an opportunity then to offer robes to Buddha Metta, so we all filed into the temple, And there's a monk who he stands in this room where Buddha Metta is behind glass, and then if you give the robes to him, he puts the robes on the Buddha image. And then we all did some chanting in there and came back out, and then there was a Vietnamese group sitting on our stuff. So our entire platform, where all of our stuff and people's jackets and our sitting cloths and our cushions were, there was different people then sitting on our stuff. Like, they didn't move our stuff, they just sat on it. And I thought, okay, this is the first test. And so we went up, and I announced to people, I was like, okay, there's another group here, and we don't do takeovers, so let's just try to get our stuff, and we'll find another spot. And so, but the plan was we were going to offer this robe and come back and meditate for an hour. But that was the plan. And then there was this Vietnamese group of 50 sitting on our stuff, so I walked up and I forcefully pulled my sitting cloth out from under this person, and they kind of like jostled a little bit, and then everybody did the same thing with their jackets and their cushions and everything. They just kind of pulled them out from under these people, and we went and found another spot. So, but everybody I was a little bit worried about the group. I thought, how are they going to deal with this? But everybody was okay, actually. And people were kind of laughing about it. And actually, you couldn't really blame them either, because a lot of them seemed quite embarrassed, and it seems like their leader might have told them to do that, and that they maybe didn't agree, that they didn't all want to sit there necessarily. So you can't really blame any one person. It's just the situation that there's a lot of big groups vying for these positions to do their pujas. A lot of different countries, a lot of different Buddhist countries. So you can just say sadhu and delight in their own goodness that they're cultivating as well. That's the best way. And there's Tibetan groups and Cambodians and all sorts of different countries. And they all there's this whole cacophony happening. And at the same time you meditate there, and it's incredibly peaceful. It's really the best place to meditate. There is some sort of energy there, and it's really amazing. So we had a very good experience. Other highlights were probably, in addition to that Samamai shrine, probably Vulture's Peak, where the Buddha had a kuti on top of Vulture's Peak, and this is where a lot of suttas took place. And the Buddha spent 5 vasas at this particular kuti that was built for him by King Bimbisara. So this is in Rajgir, in the time of the suttas, known as Rajagaha. And we went to you walk up the mountain. It's not really that incredibly far. And so they opened this bottom gate at 6 a.m. and we were there at 5:45. So since we were there early and there was no other groups there, I just said, let's do some Itipiso chanting, because we have 15 minutes, so we might as well do some chanting. And as soon as our group started all chanting together, the guards just opened the gates for us 15 minutes early. So we kept chanting while we were walking up. And then we got up, and this is an incredibly rare experience, but we actually had the place to ourselves, because this is a very, very popular spot for big pilgrimage groups to come to. And we actually were able to do a morning puja and a 30-minute sit at the Buddha's kuti on Vulture's Peak, with it completely quiet, no other groups around. And it was 30 minutes before the second group came up. And that was amazing. That was really amazing. And then we were able to move and allow the other groups to come in. It's not a very big area, and we were able to go down, and then there was another kind of open area, so we didn't really have to rush out or anything. There was another open area where it was said that Mahakassapa would hang out, and then below that there's the cave where Venerable Sariputta was enlightened. That was when the Buddha gave the Diganaka Sutta, the teaching to Diganaka, where Sariputta was fanning him from behind, and Sariputta attained arhatship when he was fanning the Buddha, listening to him give this teaching to somebody else. And so there's that cave there, really amazing feeling, just sitting in that cave for a little bit, again with really not anybody else around. And that sutta So the Buddha is sitting at the front of this cave just below his kuti on Vulture's Peak. And this Brahmin, Diganaka, comes up to the Buddha and says, I hold this view. Nothing is acceptable to me. And then the Buddha says, what about your view? Is that acceptable to you? And then he says, I am defeated. And he becomes open to the teaching. It's one of my favorites. And then during that, Sariputta is fanning the Buddha and the teaching that he gives Diganaka. Diganaka becomes a stream enterer, and then Sariputta attains arahantship at that time. So then you go, and there's also the spot where Devadatta tried to kill the Buddha. So the Buddha was coming back from his alms round, and Devadatta was standing above and used a piece of wood to try to roll a large boulder down onto the Buddha and to kill the Buddha. That was much later in the Buddha's life, but where he wanted to take over the Sangha, and it didn't work. So he became had extreme hatred toward the Buddha and tried to kill the Buddha several times. And so there's the exact spot, they say, where he rolled the boulder down, and it missed the Buddha, but a piece of the boulder broke off and cut his foot very bad. And so Vulture's Peak is a very charged area. And going into Nepal and crossing the border into Nepal is difficult these days. It can be very, very slow. So our tour guide said we should do 108 rounds of Atipiso chanting, which can take over 2 hours. So in the bus at the microphone, we're doing our puja and chanting in the bus to try to ask the devas for help to try to cross the border, because she said if things don't go well, it can be up to 8 hours to try to cross the border, and it can be really difficult. And minimum is 3 hours, so it seems like our chanting worked. We got across in 2.5 hours. And we were able to go to Lumbini and spend time there, and had extra time then to go to Kapilawatu, where the Buddha grew up, and so on. And then coming back across the border, we only had time to do 9 rounds of Atipiso because our hotel's so close to the border. So there was a Sri Lankan group in front of us. So I thought our group was big with 2 buses. So the Sri Lankan group had 7 buses. It was over almost 300 people. And it's mostly Sri Lankan grannies all dressed in white. And they actually, they're very, very nice. The Sri Lankan groups are very nice, and their chanting is very beautiful. And they normally come from boat from Sri Lanka and then by train, and then they get in the buses, and they have a monk who's leading them on their tour. And the monk actually ushered us up to the front and said, oh, the monks can go with me, they can go first, and then your lay people can go behind our lay people. So, but it all, even though it just seemed like it was going to take a long time, it went very quickly, and we got back into India and went to Savatthi, where the Buddha spent 25 years of his life. Jeta's Grove, where the Buddha spent 19 vasas. Jeta's Grove and Atapindika's Park, which is a wonderful place as well. Got to offer a large Abhayagiri flower offering to the Buddha's kuti, where everybody got to toss flowers, bags of roses and lotus and marigolds, and deck out the foundation of the Buddha's kuti there, where so many suttas happened. The Mangala Sutta happened there. So many teachings happened in Jeta's Grove and Atapindika's Park, and we just practiced through the day there. That was a very profound experience, because in the morning we made this huge flower offering, and for myself I was experiencing this piti sukha, this incredible kind of happiness at making this flower offering. And I actually wasn't expecting to experience that, and everybody got to make it. It was a very joyous occasion. And then we went, had the meal at our hotel, took a rest, came back, and our flower offering was there through the day. And because it was decked out with roses, as we were walking back into Jeta's Grove, the breeze was blowing the scent toward us, and we could smell our own flower offering, the Buddha's kuti. So then we set up our place at this lawn area under a Bodhi tree and just meditated, and some people went off and meditated on their own. It's a very large park area. We freestyle practice till closing time, which was 5 o'clock. And at closing time, we did the sharing of the verses of sharing and aspiration. And then as we were doing the verses of sharing and aspiration, the workers were sweeping our flower offering away, ready for the pilgrims on the next day. And myself and I think so many other of our pilgrims had the same experience of, it was like watching it turn into merit. It was like watching it, it was no longer physical. It was like, as they swept those flowers off, it was almost like watching it go into eternity. It's really amazing. So that was another highlight. Different people burst into tears at different holy sites. Some at the Sarnath, the Dhamak stupa, where the Dhammachakka Sutta was given. That's very powerful for some people. Some people were very moved more by the location where the Buddha passed away. We call the Mahaparinirvana Shrine. And that's a very moving sight. I know Luang Por Sumedho says that's one of his favorites, is that shrine there. And definitely that's at a place that's Kushinagar, formerly known as Kusinara. And some people get the most moved at Bodh Gaya, the place of the awakening. So different people have different karma with these different places. So just to share some of those highlights and pilgrimage and how it's worth doing. It's an amazing experience, and people are still digesting the experience. I know some people who have come back now, and I've been asking them, how are you reintegrating? How is it going for you? And one person said, like, oh, I'm not really sure what happened, but I think it was good, and it was it was amazing, whatever it was. But it's almost unbelievable. We actually did it and got back, and it went incredibly well. So I'll leave that as a reflection. And, if anybody has any questions, yeah.
I just wondered how long the entire pilgrimage took.
The 4 holy sites was 2 weeks, and then after that we spent 1 week in Bodh Gaya at the Bodhi tree on a 1-week meditation retreat. So 3 weeks total. Although 9 people could only do 2 weeks, so they left after the 2-week pilgrimage, and then the rest of us stayed on. And then I stayed on another week after that, just for self-practice after the group left.
And when did you get back?
4 days ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Were you
Mary.
staying in monasteries or
Hotels.
hotels?
Hotels, yeah.
Right.
Some of them quite nice. Yeah, 4-star hotels. Yeah. 4-star Indian style, which would probably be more like 3-star, according to what we would think of as a hotel. Yeah. The 5-star hotels are actually, I don't think they're the best for pilgrimage. They're too nice, and it's too kind of separated from what you're actually doing. And it's doubles the price as well. Has anybody here ever gone to India? You've been in India, Maggie, yeah.
Yes, I didn't do a pilgrimage as you, but some of your descriptions and Ajahn Pasano's description. Such a mixture.
It's such a mix, yeah. I kept perceiving it as a soup. It's just you can't focus on any one thing. It's just all kind of like a tornado of experience.
And I think, the comment you just made about the hotels, I've talked to some people in more recent years that have been, and it sometimes seems that people go there and are so disconnected from, staying in these places that are so unlike 90% of how people live there.
Yeah, yeah.
And acknowledging at the same time that a little bit of ease and comfort for a Westerner is very welcome.
Yeah. And our hotel in Bodh Gaya was good. It was a good middle way, and it was comfortable. One of the oddities of it was that the showers had only one temperature, and that was scalding hot. It's almost like they just hooked both up to the hot water, which usually it's like the opposite. It's like, oh, I don't have any hot water, but this was like, it was too hot. You had to like kind of like just like touch it. Yeah.
How long did the Buddha live?
The Buddha lived to the age of 81. Yeah. He passed away at the age of 81. So something our teacher, Luang Por Sumedho, he would do when he got to the age of 81, he would go to this site where the Buddha passed away and ask forgiveness for living longer than the Buddha. It was quite a lovely thing to do, to think of to do. There's also a curiosity, something that was happening at this Mahaparinibbana place was in the story in the sutta where it talks about the Buddha's last days, where the Buddha is laying on his right side and preparing to pass away. It's said that the monks who were around him, the monastics who were around him, who were arhants, were unmoved by it and weren't getting emotional about it, and then the practitioners who weren't yet arhants were bawling their eyes out and rolling on the ground, crying, and Ananda was one of those. Ananda, the Buddha's attendant, wasn't yet fully enlightened, so he couldn't bear it and left the room and was sobbing outside and saying, all too soon the Buddha is going to leave us, all too soon the light of the world is going to leave us. And then apparently there's a thing that Thais will do where they do a reenactment of Ananda's sorrow at this. So I was a little bit, we were sitting meditation in this place, and I was kind of sitting meditation, and then this Thai monk came in and he was saying in Thai, like, all too soon, the Buddha's leaving. Like did this, it was like a reenactment, and it was very dramatic. And it seems like that's a thing that like you can do out of like to express your faith. You do this reenactment of Ananda's sorrow at the Buddha leaving.
Were you leading this group, or was there two of you guiding?
I was the one who masterminded it, but then we had a Thai tour guide who actually organized everything. But I was leading it, yeah. I started planning it about 3 years ago. Yeah. It took about that long to manifest it.
So quite a lot of responsibility.
Well, I think all the preparation paid off, and then once we were on the pilgrimage, I didn't feel like I had to do very much. I mean, I still did do a lot. I did readings and readings at the different sites and guiding people in various ways, but and talking with our tour guide, and also Kathy Cheney was the tour guide on this end, on the American end, and then Lek, who was our Thai tour guide, and she's like one of the best, actually. So throughout, she was, when Ajahn Achalo led groups, and Ajahn Anan as well, she was the tour guide for them. So through my relationship with them, I was able to book her to do our tour, and that's like the very best. You can, some tour guides, they'll be good, but they won't really, they're not really practitioners, whereas Kun Lek is a practitioner. So and she does it, a lot of it, she has a big buffer of funds as well, so sometimes if there's a cancellation or something, she can absorb things and it's all very easy. She doesn't have to say like, oh, you need to pay more now or whatever. And then she's also doing dana along the way, so it's very fluid and flows very well, and she's actually totally amazing at things like crossing borders, because she knows all the managers and she knows she's done like almost 100 of these 4 holy sites pilgrimages. And like coming back in from Nepal to India, there was only 2 workers, and there's like 5. There's supposed to be 5 lines, and where there's like 5. There should be 5 border agents doing the ridiculous fingerprints and checking people's passports and stamping and stuff. And she's like, "Where is everybody? Why is there only 2 of you? I know there's supposed to be 5 of you right now." And the guy was like, "They're on their break." And she said, "I know your break isn't right now. I know your break is these hours." And they're like, "Okay." So then they kind of came out. So they can't get away with it with her. Yeah.
You said there was 42 lay people and 9 monks, is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So we had 2 buses. Yeah.
And were the people from the States or from all?
That was it was everybody from the States. It was Thais and Americans who live in the U.S. who are associated with the Bayagiri. Yeah. And a few Indians who were in the U.S. and one of them who was in India who joined up with us. But I didn't want to open it up to Thailand or other countries because then it would have been... I didn't want to open it up to people coming from Thailand because I know a lot of people in Thailand too, because then I would have had to 3, 4, 5 buses. It would have snowballed into something way too unmanageable. I say, okay, this is just an American 4 holy sites pilgrimage.
Probably be here all night answering this one, but I just wondered how it is that all these sites and stuff are still preserved for the Buddha.
Well, they were rediscovered in the mid 1800s by the British, actually. They had been forgotten. So the Bodhi tree in the Mahabodhi Stupa area was all overgrown. It was a very old temple that was extremely overgrown and was being used as a Hindu temple for hundreds of years. And that's carried over till now, where Hindus do still pray there. Yeah, particularly in the off season. So the cold season is sort of the Buddhist pilgrimage season, but then in the hot season, that's the off season, and a lot of Indian tourists go there, and a lot of Hindus. And so yeah, they were all rediscovered more recently, and so we actually have the British colonials to thank for that. It's a silver lining of the British takeover of India. So and Sir Alexander Cunningham was one of the big names in terms of, he actually seemed to have developed some sort of faith in rediscovering these sites and respect for them. And they're responsible for discovering the Asokan pillars, which allowed them to decipher the Pali language and into English. So through the ancient Brahmi script on the pillars and the Dhammapada quotes that were on the pillars and things, is these writings of Dhamma quotes on the pillars far predates the writing of the Pali Canon. So it's the earliest recorded actual writings of the Buddha are etched into these Asokan pillars. And King Asoka was only like 200 years after the Buddha. So those were all rediscovered, and then eventually the rediscovery kind of got its own momentum, and they started retracing all the footsteps of the Buddha and all these sites and linking it with the Pali Canon and seeing that it all added up. The archaeological, circumstantial, and textual evidence all adding up. So it's so for example, one is the Bodhi tree. So King Asoka had a pillar at the Bodhi tree where the Buddha was awakened, and he built a stone marker where the Buddha sat and attained awakening. But Bodhi trees only live a maximum of 800 to 1200 years. So this is the 4th Bodhi tree. It's been replanted. And the first Bodhi tree was actually, the legend says that King Asoka's, one of his queen became jealous of the Bodhi tree because he started practicing there a lot, and he was actually going there quite a lot, and she ended up poisoning and killing the original Bodhi tree. And then she ended up feeling remorseful about that and planted the second one. And so there was the second Bodhi tree in the same spot as the first. But so what happened in the meantime, though, was King Asoka's, one of his daughters became a bhikkhuni named Sanghamita. She's the one who took Buddhism to Sri Lanka. And she took a cutting. She was an arhat bhikkhuni. It said she was fully enlightened bhikkhuni. Took a cutting from the original Bodhi tree and planted it in Sri Lanka. And that was the beginning of Buddhism in Sri Lanka. And then when the queen replanted the tree, she had to get a cutting from that cutting and bring it back and plant it. And I don't know who, I can't recall who planted the third one, but Sir Alexander Cunningham himself planted the fourth one. So he might have taken a cutting from the Sri Lankan lineage of Bodhi trees. And he planted the fourth one, which is the current Bodhi tree, which is still alive in its location. So they've slightly changed locations over time. So there is that interesting history there. And then say Kapilavatthu, where it's said that in present-day Nepal, where the Buddha grew up, this is a very interesting one because when in the time of the Buddha, it was traditional for the queen to give birth in her home village. So she lived in Kapilavatthu, but she was being transported to her home village of Devadaha, but she went into labor halfway, and that's at Lumbini. So Lumbini's halfway between Kapila. We know from the textual evidence that we know where Lumbini is. That's halfway between where the Buddha grew up and where the Buddha's mother's home village is. So then if the current Kapilavatthu and where they know where Devadaha is now is, Lumbini is exactly halfway between the two. And then there's an Asokan marker in Lumbini at this, what's called the Maya Devi temple, where it says this is the exact location where the Buddha was born. It's very, very powerful. So Kapilavatthu, they didn't know for sure, and Nepal was claiming they have the real Kapilavatthu. India was claiming they have the real Kapilavatthu. So they're kind of vying for who has the real Kapilavatthu. And they're not that far from each other. They're right across the border from each other. And so in 2014, there was actually some discoveries started to be made in the Nepal Kapilavatthu, which is maybe a 3 square mile park area where there's old brick ruins. But then the time of the Buddha is not bricks. The time of the Buddha is teak and adobe. They didn't use bricks in that time. So they got down to a layer where they could see that there was some signs of teak and adobe. And they found the 10 feet down, they found where there was semi-fossilized circular discs of earth with an insignia in it, which is the insignia of Kapilavatthu. And semi-fossilized insignia, that's because this insignia was stamped into the butt ends of these big pillars. And that created, they discovered this, and they could see, this was one pillar and this was another pillar, and there's this huge archway here, and this was the east gate where the Bodhisattva rode out to go become a monk. And so, and that's really cool because when you go to there, it also adds up because in the text, the Buddha rode out to a river called the Anoma River, which is about 50 miles away. And the Anoma River the Buddha lived in the state of Kosala. So Kapilavatthu was in the state of Kosala, and then across the border of this river was Magadha, the biggest state at the time, where King Bimbisara was the king, the biggest state in India at the time. And he had to cross into the other state to not be pursued by his countrymen, so he could really ordain and really do it. And so on maps, that river is still called the Anoma River. It's got the same name, and the distance all adds up. And it's said that his charioteer took him out on his horse and this horse went all the way, and that when the horse came back, the horse died of a broken heart. They say in the Thai version of the story, they say it died of a broken heart, but I think its heart actually might have given out because it was so long to come back. And it's said that there's a stupa that was made to the horse. And so if you look out from this east gate, there's a mound. There's an unexcavated stupa to the horse that's there. They haven't even done it yet. They haven't even gotten around to excavating it yet. But it's a mound that's clearly at the place where the horse died. So it all adds up. It's very interesting. The one at the Kapilavatthu in India, then they've discovered now, is during the Buddha's life there was a huge war where the Sakyans fought with another clan, and the Sakyans were all wiped out, and the remainder of them had to move to a new location. So the one in India is now, they call it the new Kapilavatthu. It's where the Sakyans moved after they were defeated. But it's not where the Buddha grew up. But it's where they reestablished their place after they were defeated in this horrible conflict that took place. And that comes up in the suttas too, where the Buddha is telling his countrymen, if you go to war over this, it was over water rights of the Rohini River, and if you go to war over this, the water is going to flow red. And then they didn't heed his advice, and sure enough, the water did flow red. And then the Sakyans were all wiped out after that. So yeah, they've kind of, over time, they've discovered all these places. And when I went there in 2017, it was still fairly new because they just discovered this in 2014. And there was Western archaeologists from Durham University at the site. That's how exciting it was, that they had their own tent set up, and we talked to them for a bit. There was Indian and Western archaeologists there. That was like a UNESCO. Now it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. But yeah, for a long time it went into decline. So Nalanda, the biggest university in the world, with a library that rivaled the size of the Library of Alexandria, and like a 9-story library, had 10,000 monastics living there, and supposedly all practicing well, and was there until, and was built in Sariputta's home village. It was built around maybe 100 years after started being built 100 years after the Buddha passed away. And so then with the destruction of Nalanda University in the 11 or 1200s, by either a Hindu or an Islamic warlord who burned the place down. And it's said that the library burned for 3 months before the fire actually went out completely. So a lot was lost at that time. But that was pretty much the end of Buddhism in India. So after 1200, you could say Buddhism was non-existent in India. So all these holy sites got overgrown, and people knew about them, but it had gone to other countries, and Buddhism was flourishing in other places already. So, so Nalanda, Nalanda, it happened suddenly. It got burned. It got attacked when everybody was having their meal. So when they rediscovered the ruins of Nalanda, they actually discovered alms bowls with unfinished food in them that was preserved. It's all very interesting. I also had this idea that doing a pilgrimage to the 4 holy sites from America could be maybe something that was very powerful in terms of helping establish Buddhism more in America. Maybe even helping the country a little bit. helping tip the scales of goodness.